Hi, everyone. I'm glad you're here because today's episode is a doozy. Today, I have 3 stories that nearly shattered everyone involved as they tried to rationalize what happened to them. Just wait until you hear what you're about to hear. So, if you're enjoying the channel, don't be invisible. Let us know you're out there and smash that subscribe button so we can always be together. Thanks. Now, let's get into the stories. I was a police officer in the North Woods of Minnesota. Given the area, the number of vehicle collisions with wildlife was quite high. Standard procedure was to make sure the occupants of the vehicle were all accounted for and received proper medical attention, report the damages to the vehicle or other property, and dispatch the injured animal if necessary. Now, nobody calls an ambulance when they run over a raccoon, but we have deer, elk, moose, and bear up here that can cause some real damage. The worst 2 animal collisions I've ever seen were from bear and moose. Just last summer, I was on the scene of a driver who hit a male black bear with a Dodge Ram. The truck was totaled, but luckily, the driver survived with few injuries. Moose are probably the worst, especially if you're in a car or a small SUV. More often than not, the vehicle strikes the moose at the knees and it falls on top of the car and crushes it. Many people don't survive that. Accidents with white-tailed deer are by far the most common, and they vary from totaling the car to getting away with a scratch or a broken headlight if it's not a direct impact. If I get a call about a vehicle collision with a moose, I know it's most likely going to be bad. If it's a deer, it could be anything. And after what I saw on that cold October night, I do mean anything. I was called along with an ambulance about a vehicle collision with a deer. The dispatcher said that there was only 1 occupant in the vehicle, and she was reported to be mostly uninjured. But when I got there, I saw it was a teenage girl. She had a few cuts and bruises from the airbag deploying, but seemed medically all right otherwise. She was pretty shaken up, but most people are after a vehicle accident, so I didn't think anything of it at the time. Her vehicle, a newer model SUV, looked like it was totaled. The front end was completely smashed in and the front windshield was shattered. The front right tire was barely attached. To be honest, I was surprised that the girl didn't have any other injuries. I noticed what looked like bits of muscle tissue and deer hair on the front of her vehicle, or what was left of the front of her vehicle. I didn't see the deer lying anywhere, but I didn't imagine it could have survived an impact like that. There was something strange, though, too. The whole front of the car smelled like decomposition. The accident happened only a few moments before, and yet the pieces of deer smelled already rotten. It wasn't the heat from the engine searing the hair either. It was something else. It smelled like something that had been dead for weeks. I was on a wellness check once for an older gentleman who had unfortunately passed away before we arrived. The medical examiner gauged him to have been dead at least a week, maybe a week and a half. Now, if you've ever smelled a decomposing body before, that sticks with you. And that is exactly what this smelled like to me. I looked around in the ditches for some rotten roadkill to explain the stench, but I didn't find anything. I pulled one of the EMTs away and asked if they could smell it too, and they said that the scene had smelled like that since they had arrived. The driver looked like she would be okay, and that was the important thing right now. When I talked to her, she didn't appear to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol. She overheard me talking to the EMT about the smell, and she claimed it suddenly came out of nowhere right before she saw the deer in the road. This particular stretch of road was right at a blind corner, so she didn't see the deer until it was too late. She hit it head on at 45 miles an hour. When I asked some other questions, she said the deer looked sick. Its fur was long and matted, longer than a normal deer's fur usually was. And she said it was skinny and she could see its bones, like literally see its bones. She said it had patches of skin missing and she could see its white rib bones poking out past the muscle. It must have been an already injured deer, maybe with gangrene. Most likely it had been hit by a vehicle before and suffered some pretty severe damage. It's not a common situation, but it's not unheard of. It was either that or else the deer was suffering from chronic wasting disease or brainworm. Those theories went right out the window, though, when she described its face. She said it looked like a skull, white, with no hair at all on it, and that it had antlers like an elk, and, get this, no eyes. They were just empty, black sockets. I started to question whether this girl might actually be on some type of drug, because the whole thing sounded insane. I started looking around for the deer. We were surrounded by woods on both sides of the road, but I doubted this thing could have gotten far. I didn't even step off the road before I noticed the outline of white antlers among the trees. The girl was right. They looked just like elk antlers, but the animal didn't appear large enough to be an elk. It was looking directly at me, as if it had been watching us the entire time. I couldn't see its face in the shadows of the forest, but the smell of decomp grew stronger, and though I didn't know exactly what I was looking at, I knew there was something terribly wrong here. I pointed my flashlight at the woods. I only saw the creature for a second. The girl's description of it was accurate. Its face was a skull. No eyes, just black holes in its head, skinny and matted. I shined the light directly at its face. It tilted its head, just like a dog does when it hears a strange noise, like it was curious. It rustled its antlers in the brush. I thought about shooting at it, but if this thing survived that accident, I wasn't sure a gun could take it down, and I didn't want to find out the hard way if I was wrong. I told the EMTs to hurry up and stay inside the ambulance. They must have thought I was crazy. I waited there for the tow truck after the ambulance left. The creature stayed the entire time, just watching. The only part of it I could see was the outline of its antlers. It kept itself in the shadows. I put collision with a deer on my report. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't imagine anyone would believe me otherwise. I haven't seen anything like it again myself, but I've heard other stories from the area, and thank goodness for that. At least it makes me think I wasn't crazy that night. I'm a contract logger, and I have an interesting story regarding something my crew and I experienced last summer in Alaska. I was in the area for a 3-month contract. I had been working for my boss for a few years, so I had a pretty good thing going. And I was, and still am, close to a handful of the guys on the crew. Once all the paperwork was figured out, I headed north on a flight with 2 other guys who lived near me in California. We each see each other regularly and usually get called in on these jobs together. Their names are Jed and Chuck. Both have about 10 years on me, but my dad and granddad were also loggers, so it's in my blood, and they respect that. We flew out to meet our boss and the rest of the crew, about 15 people in total, including 2 greenhorns who were training on skids. I'm a skidder operator myself and was slotted to do just that on this job. The first day, we just settled into the lodgings we were given by the Forestry Service, and the next day, we went out to check out the acreage. We were out in the Tongass in southeast Alaska, an area that's been logged for centuries. Our boss went over the plans with us for how to handle the layout of the land and what to take down first. It was pretty cut and dry, and we were going to be out there from June to late August. Perfect time to be in Alaska since that's about the height of summer, with the best weather. So I was also looking forward to exploring as much as I could. The land we were working was pretty straightforward, with only a small rise to the west. Nothing I couldn't handle on the skidder. Jed also works a skidder, and Chuck is a faller, one of the guys who actually cuts down the trees. He's also a climber as needed, which is important to this story. About 2 weeks into the job, one of the green guys injured his ankle when a log rolled onto it, and Chuck had to replace him for a bit as a climber. Climbers get up high and lob off the limbs at the top to make it safer to take down the rest of the tree. The view, especially in Alaska, must be amazing. But I have problems with heights, so it's not an option for me. So he was up on a Sitka spruce checking his harness before making cuts when he suddenly stopped and called down on the radio. "I can see something heading this way from the east," he said, which was unusual considering the amount of noise we were making with saws and machines. East of where we were was a slight ridge, and Chuck explained that the animal was walking near the edge of the ridge but still back in the trees. Our boss, Frank, said not to worry about it. It wasn't in the area we were logging, and it would surely be scared away by the noise. Chuck got back to work, and I was dragging a load of trunks up to the landing. About a minute later, he got back on the radio to report that the animal was getting closer along the ridge. Jose, another climber who was over on another spruce, reported the same. He had a clearer view of the animal and relayed down that it was white. Jed got excited thinking it might be a spirit bear, an all-white black bear that's very rare to see. But within seconds, Jose got on the radio again and sounded scared this time. Frank tried to calm him down, but Jose started climbing down immediately. Chuck stayed up in his spruce, but was very quiet. I radioed up to him on another channel that we sometimes used just to chat, and I asked if he was okay. It took a few tries before he finally responded. "I don't think it's a bear," he said, in a serious voice. "It's too big." He was quick to get back on the other radio and have a talk with Frank, confirming that whatever it was staying along the ridge. Frank gave in and called lunch early. Jose was freaked out at this point, but Chuck was still calm. He told Jed and myself that he was absolutely sure it was not a bear. Jose agreed. Jose thought it was a Yeti. I laughed at first, but when Chuck didn't laugh, I asked if that's what he thought it was. He said that while he hadn't gotten a clear look at it because of the distance, it did carry itself like an ape. And that was hard to argue with since apes and bears move very, very differently. Both men claimed that it had been walking on two legs, bipedally, along the ridgeline, and it kept stopping as if it was trying to see what we were doing. When lunch ended, Chuck got right back up in the spruce. He then radioed down to us that the creature wasn't anywhere that he could see. I never got a look at it, but from how Chuck and Jose reacted, it sounds like they saw something they hadn't been expecting to see in the area or anywhere. I wouldn't be totally surprised if we found out it was a Yeti or something like that, because the Tongass National Forest area is huge, basically a little over 16 million acres. And that could explain why whatever it was hadn't been scared off by the sounds and could have been drawn into them instead, not knowing what they were. Throughout the rest of our time there, Chuck and the other climbers, there were 4 on the team in total, kept their eyes out, but never saw the creature again. If it was a Yeti or a Bigfoot or something similar, it probably got the message that it shouldn't be in the area and headed off in another direction. Since then, I keep an extra eye out on our jobs, but I haven't experienced anything that strange again, even in the deepest woods. I'm a fire specialist with the Department of Natural Resources in a northwestern state, but I'm not comfortable saying which state. In case anybody out there is not familiar with that title, a fire specialist is just like a regular firefighter, except that we only deal with fires that happen in our parks and game lands. I'm the type of guy who just clocks in, does what he's told, clocks out at the end of the day, and leaves it behind. Life's too short to dwell on your job after you punch that clock. But recently, something happened on the job that really disturbed me. I've been back and forth over whether I should say anything. My wife says no, that I should leave it be, but I think the people have a right to know. One of our state forests here is very large and very popular. It's a great place for fishing and camping, and it gets pretty crowded in the good weather. A buddy of mine is a ranger there. We were having a few beers one night, and he told me that there had been a rash of Bigfoot sightings in the park. Now you might laugh, but I didn't, and neither did he. It's more common than you think for people to see strange things in the forest, at least around here. While I personally have never seen anything that looked like a Bigfoot, there's been times I've been in the woods and felt like something was watching me. And mind you, that's even happened after an area has been evacuated of the general public, like when we're about to do a controlled burn. Now, when my buddy told me that, I just asked him if anybody had managed to get any pictures. We're all waiting for that day, when somebody finally snaps a picture and proves the existence of these things. He said no, but he and one of the other rangers decided to set up game cameras right in the same area that people had reported seeing the creature. I didn't think too much of it, just said, "Cool, keep me posted," and we moved on to another subject. Then, about a week later, he calls me, all excited, and he says they did it. They got an image. I was stunned. He said it was pretty clear and no one would be able to say it was fake. So of course I wanted to see it. He told me to come on by the station whenever I could get over there. It's about an hour away. Well, we had some family stuff come up right after that, or I would have gone immediately. Nothing serious, but family comes first. It was 5 days later when I finally called my friend and told him I'd like to come by in about 2 days. That was my next day off. I had to leave a voicemail because he didn't pick up his phone. Then the evening before I was supposed to go and see him, I got a call from my supervisor. He instructed me to report the next day to the regional office for a controlled burn. I said, "What? That's my day off. There were no wildfires going on, so why pull me in?" He said it was non-negotiable, and that was that. He didn't give any details, just said I would find out more at the regional office. So, that stunk, but whatever. I showed up there the next day with 5 guys, and we were given the specifics. I was shocked. We were going to burn a whopping 500 acres, based on a spur-of-the-moment decision. I bet you can guess where, too. That's right. They were having us do a ping-pong ball drop right smack over the area that had all of the Bigfoot sightings. A ping-pong ball drop is when we fly over with a PSD dispenser on board. It injects glycol into a plastic sphere that contains potassium permanganate, and then it shoots it out of a helicopter. The combination triggers a thermogenic reaction, igniting the area in a flash. The only other times I've ever been involved in a ping-pong ball drop was when an area was already on fire. It's safer than going in on foot. I'd never seen it used for prescribed burn around here before, but we did it. 500 acres went up in flames, and I couldn't help but wonder if the reason was that they found out that the Bigfoot creature was really in there. I tried calling my friend, wanting to get his take on it. I kept getting his voicemail, and he never called me back. So I finally had a day off, and I went over to the park that he worked at. There was a new guy there that I had never met before, and he said my friend had been transferred, but he didn't know where. This whole thing reeks to me of a cover-up. Last time I talked to him, he was excited about how he and another ranger had finally gotten some pictures of the creature. I wish he had told me that guy's name, the last name at least, though I wouldn't be surprised if he was transferred too. Anyway, I wrote him a letter telling him about the ping-pong ball drop. I didn't say too much, just in case the letter ever gets intercepted, but I wanted him to know, in case he didn't already. I figured his mail will get forwarded to wherever he's living now. All I can think is maybe he's avoiding me. Maybe because he was told not to talk about the picture. It would take a pretty serious threat, though, for him to stay quiet. He's a pretty hard-headed guy. I guess that's all I have to say, except now, whenever I'm told to do a controlled burn, I'm going to wonder if there's an ulterior motive.